Good evening. This is the call to the order for the Wednesday, February the 5th Policy Committee meeting. Mrs. Shope, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Tom Hankins.
Here.
Amy Levy.
Here.
And Brian Nichols.
Here.
All members are present.
And could I get an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second? Is there a second? I'll second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
I'm sorry, my hand is raised.
Yes, Board Member Levy.
Thank you. So I just wanted to point out, I'm concerned that this evening's agenda includes a review of policy 881.1, district booster clubs, when there is an active policy already using this number. The current active policy 881.1 is relations with family school organizations. And if we reviewed policy in number groupings, we could avoid this. For example, the current active 881.1 titles could have been adjusted to read relations with family school organizations and booster clubs. And the content from the proposed policy tonight could have been listed as policy 881.1 Rule 2, which is available because the content under that policy number has been renumbered 883. So I'm just concerned that our current process is keeping us from being comprehensive and reducing our effectiveness.
Thank you, Board Member Levy. Actually, that is noted on the that is actually noted on the agenda page for the policy for the discussion tonight. Because of that issue, it's described in the public content per section on 881.1. So we're going to address that when we get to that policy. So, can I get an approval of the agenda? Oh. All those in favor say aye.
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 You need to ask if there's any nays or
Is
abstentions.
there any nays?
Nay.
Okay. Motion carried 2-1. And could I get an approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Oh, my hand is raised. Just wanted to note, according to policy, that I'm abstaining because I didn't attend that meeting, so I'm not able to
Yep, I was
participate in
going
that.
to ask for that.
Thank you.
Say, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions?
I abstain.
Okay. Motion carried 2-0 with 1 abstention. Okay, the first item up is policy 881.1 district booster clubs. And when this was brought forward by the district administration, it was noted in the policy that it's 881 is actually being used for our relations with family/school organizations, PTO/PTA. If we want to go by the WASB policy guide, 881.1 should be the booster club policy, and the relations with family school organizations should be 881.2. There's also an 881.1 Rule 1 that would need to be renumbered to 881.2 Rule 1. These policies were just revised less than a year ago in July of 23. So, I think what we need a motion to, well, we can discuss this policy, but it's going to need to be renumbered. And so open for discussion. Board Member Levy.
Thank you so much. So a couple concerns. One, since the other policy that would be impacted is not listed on the agenda, we can't take action on that tonight because it's not noticed. And that was my point in the discussion with the agenda. If we looked at number groupings, and we don't have to spend a ton of time on each one, but all of them are available to be edited, so we can handle all of these things at once. That aside, I do have other concerns with the policy, so I don't know how you want to handle discussion. Do you want to get into the content of the discussion, or do you want to handle naming and then the content?
I think we should handle the naming and then the context. So would you like to, do you have further discussion on that?
Well, I just want to reiterate, since the current policy is not on the agenda, we can't address that this evening. And again, that's the point for looking at policies and number groupings. So we could name this as it's listed, but then we would be sending it to the full board, and the other part of the puzzle would remain unaddressed.
Board President Johnson.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit behind in following the meeting. So I'm a little bit confused. This policy was adopted previously, and there's already a policy in existence?
May I, or?
And I see that for this one, Dan Grants, the athletic director, is the person presenting, but I don't see him here
He's not
tonight.
here.
Well, that's part of my content issues, which it seems like our chair wants to separate, which is totally fine. So the proposed policy is brand new, but it's using a number that already exists for another policy. And that's fine if I don't think we need to follow WASB's numbering so carefully that ours is identical. I think it just needs to be in the correct category. And if we have a little variance, I think that's completely okay. However, I yield to the will of the committee. If the committee wants to stick with policy 881.1 for the new booster club, that's perfectly fine, but there's already a 881.1 relations with family school organizations, which is an active policy. And since that policy is not noticed under that number on the agenda, we can't swap all the numbers to get it how we want it in one meeting. And that's my concern.
Board President Johnson.
May I ask the board secretary a question?
Absolutely.
Mrs. Shope, do you know, did Dan Grants submit this to you, or why this was chosen as this number? What the rationale was behind it? You usually have a good backstory.
So Dan Gratz submitted the proposed policy. He asked, he and Emily Pels, the president, asked for some sample policies. I reached out to my colleagues to see if they had sample policies. Not a lot of the districts have sample policies. A lot of them just have like guidelines or websites that have guidelines and bylaws. Some had policies, so I was able to pull some of that together. I helped him do a little bit of modification to kind of get it into more of a policy format because it wasn't totally like that. And then he had no idea what number to give it. And so I was kind of going through our policies to see where it would fit best. And when I looked up in the WASB policy guide, they actually have a number for booster clubs, which is the 881.1, which is why I put in the content area of the board report that if that's the number that you would like to make it, we would just simply have to renumber the other policy and the accompanying rule to the number that I suggested, because that's where they technically should belong in that policy guide, if that's what you want to follow, which we kind of had that conversation at the last policy meeting about whether the board and the policy committee wants to follow that or not. So that's why I kind of left it that way. And when we were getting ready to post the agenda, Chair Nichols and I kind of had that conversation so he would understand why that was written in the board report the way it was. So I'm not saying you have to follow that, I'm just saying that's where it would fit in. And so that was the number. It was assigned temporarily as a placeholder to get it on the agenda. So I don't know if the committee would be comfortable making the motion to, if you decide to approve the policy, to move it forward, making the motion to give it that number and to bring forward those other two policies to the full board to change their number accordingly. That's up to you guys. Because those policies were just reviewed less than a year ago.
Board Member Hankins. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
I'm just looking for a resolution. Is there a way, the way it's posted, can we change that number from 881.1 discussion and give it another one so we're not having to change? Can we give it another number here and still move forward? Or do we have to still go change it and then come back?
Well, I will give you my opinion, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's right. But my opinion is that we should be able, I would think that we should be able to make this with motions and renumber the other couple of policies and then move on. Board Member Levy?
Thank you so much. So just a couple things. One, I don't believe it's appropriate to take up policies that are not noticed on the agenda. So that's not something I would be able to participate in. If it's okay, can I get to my content concerns? Because
Sure.
that may make this a moot point.
Sure.
So I'll start with Policy 151, Board Policy Development, states in formulating policies, which this is new, the board shall, whenever appropriate, consult individuals and groups affected by the policies. It's my understanding that one, Mr. Gratz isn't here to present this, which is concerning to me. And two, the current leadership of our multiple booster clubs have not had an opportunity to read and provide feedback. And they are the ones that would be governed by this policy. So I think it's premature for this committee to address it, and we don't have feedback from the people who would be governed by it. This may not be an exhaustive list, but just so everyone's on the same page, I am aware that we have multiple booster clubs. So there's the Gridiron, which handles football. There's Beloit girls basketball. There's band. There's swim. There's hockey. And then there's the BMHS Booster Club, which handles multiple sports. Just to let you know, Chair, that Deanne Evans, who is the president of that booster club, is in the audience if you want to lean on her for information, but that's totally at your discretion. So one, I don't think we should be reviewing this because they haven't reviewed it and provided feedback, because the AD is not here, and because the other policies that are impacted by this name change, I would like to do that all at once. The other concerns I have is this policy could go into effect as soon as March 4th. And my question, which I'm not sure who I'm asking it to, is has any thought been given to the timeline, if any, that Boosters Club will have to be compliant if they're not already compliant with everything that's listed in a policy, that it's my understanding they haven't had an opportunity to read. And has any thought been given to when this policy should go into effect? Now, most times, new policies go into effect as soon as they have that second reading from the board. But we are in the middle of the school year, and we have booster clubs, I'm assuming, currently active. And so if they are not compliant with this new policy once it's approved, it's my understanding they would no longer be acknowledged by the district. And I don't think that's, no problem. I don't think that's fair to spring it on a booster club like mid-year, mid-season. And then my other concern is the State of Wisconsin Booster Club guidelines are referenced in the policy. I was not able to easily identify that document. And normally, if we reference a document, we have it cross-listed at the bottom so people can go there and check it and make sure that they're being compliant. So my other question is, does anyone have that document readily accessible? And we definitely need to include that in any new policy that we would propose. Thank you.
Okay, well, now it feels like we are way, go. Let me finish my spot, and then you can, I think we're way ahead of where we need to be on this. That's my, thank you for all your clarification, Board Member Levy, I really appreciate it. And Mrs. Shope, thank you for sharing about the information. So, Board President Johnson.
Just what I would suggest is maybe delaying this until the next policy committee meeting, and that way we can get the things in order and make certain that Mr. Gratz is available to be here.
Thank you. That's pretty much where I was going to go. But anyway, Board Member Pankins, you have a comment?
Yes, well, to be clear, Mr. Gratz should have been here if he proposed this. Number two, I was wondering what the protocol is. We have one here. Why weren't the other ones here? And whose job was it to inform them that this might be affecting their booster clubs? Was it Gratz or us or admin, or when did this get posted? I'm hearing that it was kind of it might have been not noticed, not saying correctly, timely, but was Mr. Gratz supposed to do this legwork? And I don't know, can't ask him, he's not here, which really disappoints me. But I agree, but I just want to know the protocol. If we're, not to blame anybody, but if we have one here, why aren't the other ones represented?
Can I jump in on this?
Go ahead, Dr. Garrison.
And I apologize for my absence. The district's booster clubs conversation has been an ongoing conversation for quite some time since I've arrived. What we wanted to do was bring this policy to the board for discussion, policy committee for discussion, hear your feedback. Of course, naturally, I would have liked Mr. Gratz to be here. He is not. However, we can still take your feedback and bring that back forward. Not all policy conversations are supposed to be captured, done, wrapped up into a bowl in one session each time as well. Some of these things do take time. And I feel like that's also a space that we also need to recognize. So if your questions were, and I wasn't here for the beginning part of the conversation, but if your questions was captured, we can get those questions answered and we can bring back an even more polished conversation for the next time. That's what policy is sometimes. I think we may get, misconstrued around what is supposed to happen and when it's supposed to happen and how it's supposed to happen. But in the absence of one of my one of my employees not being here, we can still capture what questions you may have and bring those questions back, get those questions answered, send those responses to the board, to the policy committee, to have a more fruitful conversation next time. I don't think we should have to, always have, in this space maybe, a automatic, this is it, let's move it straight to the board and we're done with it, because this may be one of those that take a little time to make sure that we work its way through. So I apologize for Mr. Grass's absence. I'm not going to assume what was stated beforehand, But if we were able to capture those questions, Mrs. Shope, we can get those questions answered, and we can move accordingly with the other policies where we do have, participation.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Garrison. Well, the policy was brought forward, it showed up when the draft was sent to me. This was already on there, and all the comments under the public comment, or the purpose, name and title and purpose, and it's showed as an action item, not a discussion item. So just FYI. But I believe that, I agree with Board President Johnson. That was where I was going to go, but I wanted to let her talk first. So I think we need to table this for this evening and move and bring it forward to the March, whatever the date is, March 4th, I think, meeting for review, and hopefully Mr. Gatz can be here for that.
I mean, and again, just because it says action on the opportunity, if the board is not really ready to make an action, we can always, like you just mentioned, table it.
Yep.
And we can keep moving forward. And that's a space that the board has the option to do.
Sure.
And again, I will take a look at the questions that was proposed in my absence, and we'll be able to move accordingly.
Okay. Board Member Hank.
Yes, just to bring Dr. Garrison a little bit up to speed, the conversation was, part of it, this affects a lot of different booster clubs, and only one is represented. And we, as a policy committee, wanted more input from the booster clubs. So we can sit here and go through this exercise, but at the end of the day, this committee wants to hear more input from the people who will be most directly affected. And Mr. Gratz isn't here, and there's only one booster club president here, which is disappointing. So I think in all fairness to everybody, it's a good idea to table it until we can get more bodies here to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hankins. Board President Johnson.
Thank you. Mrs. Levy had listed several booster clubs. Can we, for the next discussion, have a list of the booster clubs and what they represent so that we're all aware of them?
Definitely.
And Dr. Garrison, will you talk to Athletic Director Gratz and have him get input from the various booster clubs?
Sure, that's not a problem.
And if that's okay with you, Chairman Nichols.
Thank you. Board Member Levy.
Thank you so much. The only thing that I would add is I think it's one thing to get input, but it's another thing to make sure that the leadership of each of the booster clubs has this policy in their hand so that they can read it for themselves. They can determine if they are compliant, if they are not currently compliant, what needs to happen so that they can be compliant. And then if you don't mind, Dr. Garrison, just really quickly what my concerns were, and hopefully this will save you from going back and having to watch the tape, is that this policy, if it passed forward tonight, could have went into effect as early as March 4th. Now it could go into effect as early as sometime in April after a second reading from the full board. So my question is, has any thought been given to a timeline, if any, where booster clubs would have to be compliant? And my concern is if we don't make a special accommodation for this policy. For example, it will take effect at the beginning of the 25-26 school year. We could have booster clubs that are in the middle of seasons, in the middle of the school year that are operating, and then all of a sudden, if we're following this policy, they're no longer recognized by the district, and that's going to negatively impact our kids ultimately. So that's a concern. Also, the state of Wisconsin booster club guidelines are referenced in the policy, but I couldn't readily find that document. So if someone has that, if they could provide it, because I think that would be helpful for us to be familiar with, and then also cross-reference that at the bottom of the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Levy. Okay, could I get a motion to move these move this policy to the March 4th meeting.
So moved.
Actually, I would like to offer an amendment. If we could also make sure that on that March agenda is the current policy 881 or 881.1 relations with family school organizations. So if we choose to renumber, we can handle that all at once.
Okay,
So is that accepted? Is
Yes,
that
that's-
acceptable?
yes,
Okay, thank
yes.
you so much. I'd like to second.
okay. Any further discussion? No? The amended motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried 3-0. Okay, next up is policy or 2B, item policy 183, voting method with a proposed name change to board member voting and participation in meetings. So I will open it up for discussion. Member Levy?
Thank you. So a few things. So in the middle of the green portion, when it's talking about a member who is not present may not vote by proxy, that totally makes sense, and may not in their absence have their opinions or concerns on a matter shared by others during the board meeting. I guess my initial question is, what is the point of adding that? And I think we have a couple recent examples. I don't think he would mind me sharing, but Brian Anderson was not able to attend a meeting recently, and he sent us kind of some notes of his thought. And I thought that was really helpful, and it made the conversation more robust. I wasn't able to attend a recent policy meeting, but I did go through the agenda and provide my notes, and I hope those were helpful. So unless I'm missing something, I don't see what the harm is. If a board member wants to take the time and prepare and review and submit their thoughts, clearly understanding that they're not able to vote because they're not present. So if I could just get clarification why that was added, and then I have a couple other things that would be helpful.
Thank you. Board President Johnson, I'll answer all these at the same time.
Oh, thank you. Well, I don't necessarily have a question, but just, I know sometimes during meetings, people have said, what is so-and-so's opinion on this? And to me, my personal opinion, if we have it in writing, then from that person, emailed by that person, that would make sense. But to hear it through somebody else's mouth saying, oh, I talked to this person, I'm not so comfortable with that.
Okay. Thank you. Board Member Hankins?
Yeah, I'll be a little bit more technical than that. Again, our whole job is to be here in person and live, and I know there's cases when you can't. But to have your comments read by other people for you, number one, there's the security involved, and you can say it came from their email account. Those sometimes can be stolen. They can be produced by somebody else. In this day and age, hacking is huge, and it's a slippery slope. I know during the COVID time, there was lots of reasons not to gather, but that is certainly not in the nature anymore. I think attendance is mandatory. Recently, I was only able to attend by phone, and I certainly agree with the expressions of concern that I was sitting in my car on my cell phone. And although everybody knew it was me, but nobody knew who was around me. And that is certainly correct. I think it's a slippery slope. We start doing this, and we start doing everything virtually or by emails. We're missing the point of being here. And I just think it's a slippery slope. I like this tidying up of it. I don't think it takes the hard stance of we will never consider that, but I think it's time we address it and get some proper order into before we also, I could start, the 2 times that Mrs. Levy is talking about, I sat here and went, oh, wait, their viewpoints are getting read and they're getting more credence to the guy sitting here. And yes, I could have stood up and said something, but I heard admin reading emails from board members, and I'm like, that's not their job. It really disturbed me. I wasn't the author of this change, but I certainly agree with it. And not because of the examples, but I think it's a slippery slope that we should at least discuss and get an accurate policy on this, right or wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hankins. Board Member Levy?
Thank you. I appreciate your perspective. I don't agree, but I appreciate you sharing that. I would be in favor of, and may in their absence, have their opinions, have their written opinions or written notes on the matter shared by either the president or the chair. I don't think there's rampant hacking of our accounts. And I think it's proper and appropriate that if I, for some reason, am not able to be physically present for a meeting or virtually, if I sent the board president my notes, or if I sent the chair of whatever committee my notes, I think that is a way to make the conversation more robust, because we so often have different perspectives. I don't see the harm in doing that.
I agree with that, Board Member Levy, but that's not the case what happened. I heard admin reading, let's be concise, back to you, and I didn't hear Brian Nichols, the chair, or he may have weighed in, but I heard admin reading your emails, which to me was totally out of line unless given permission by the board chair or the board president. Thank you. So if we could just tidy that up, I would be more than happy with that.
Sure. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. So would you be opposed to us structuring it so that in a board member's absence, they can send their notes to either the board president or the committee chair to have them included when that item is discussed by the full board?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. So I would be in favor of, and may in their absence have their notes on matters shared by either the board president or committee chair during the board meeting.
Could you clarify where you want, where your suggestion?
Yeah, absolutely. And Ms. Shope, let me know if you need me to read. So I'm in that green section. It's like the third line down. It starts with proxy. And if we adjusted it to say, and may in their absence have their notes shared by either the board president or committee chair during the board meeting. Or we could just say during the meeting, and then if we say board president or committee chair, I think people would understand, whoever is presiding would read.
Okay.
Dr. Garrison?
I just want to make sure that we note that I'm okay with both spaces as the district administrator, and that you all do work with me. Secondly, I want to say that the goal in this space to me is about collaboration. You know, the board members are supposed to be collaborating with each other, and your opinions and thoughts should be shared. How it gets there, based off of what we just shared amongst each other, I'm fine with. Sending it to the board president or chair for communication is perfectly fine. But again, the goal to me is collaboration amongst the board members, and of course the district administrator, because you know, I'm here to help and assist. That is part of my goal as the district administrator. So I kindly disagree with you, Mr. Hankins, that I can't read something from a chair or from a board member, because things are sent to me. Communication does happen. And so whether it stays that way or not, or superintendent, I'm fine with, but the goal is collaboration. That's my statement.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison. Board President Johnson.
Dr. Garrison, things do get sent to you, but for these meetings, you're not the presiding officer.
Sure.
So I agree with Board Member Levy's statement that it should be the presiding officer. If board members want to copy you on the email, that's fine. If not, I quite truthfully, that's fine too, because when somebody's expressing their opinion, we all come to this board and we don't know what everyone's going to say. You know, we have surprises. So it's important that it is the presiding officer.
Thank you, Board President Johnson. Well, now I'm gonna put my 2 cents worth in as the policy chair. So I would agree with what Board Member Hankins said, that, you know, it's our job to be here. That's what the public expects. The constituents, the people that voted us into this position, expect us to be here and be looking out for the school district from their standpoint. That's part of this whole thing. Board Member Levy, I'm good with sending a note. I think it should only be to the policy chair or the president, without anybody else, because I think that's where we get into, that's just where we get into things getting out of hand, so to speak. And so I'm good with that change. Is there any other discussion on any other part of the policy that there's any concerns? Board Member Hankins?
Mine's just a comment that our committees and our board are board-driven. Admin is here for resourcing, advising, creating, but these committees, admin, and what I felt was it's a slippery slope, and if they're shared to everybody, somebody might start picking and choosing and interpolating what a comment email said, and anyways, just to clear it up, I just think the policy, the way it's stated with the amendment graciously made by Board Member Levy, which I totally agree with, should go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hankins. Board Member Levy?
Thank you. And I want to be clear before I make my next statement. Please let's all be conscious that we don't share anything from closed session. All right. With that being said, I just had 2 other concerns. It says in the proposed that board members will not have the option to participate virtually in closed session. And so, and I get if that is coming from a secure location perspective, but if we are potentially giving legal counsel the option to participate in closed session, why would we not extend that to board members? And then my other concern was, let me just read it to make sure I'm doing it right. Legal counsel in closed session meetings shall be at the discretion of the board president. I think it should be at the discretion of the board. And one reason why I think that would be a good idea if we can have legal counsel participating virtually is that could be a potential cost savings. We don't have this person physically in the room and then our meeting runs late and they're just waiting and the clock is kind of running on what we're paying. Or if we don't need them, they're not here, and then find out we didn't need them, we can have them on standby, which hopefully is cheaper than having them here physically. So again, one, I just want clarification. If legal counsel has the option to participate in closed session, why would board members not have the same ability? And I totally understand if we want to be clear on how you confirm that you are in a secure location, again, without sharing details. And then I think it should be at the discretion of the board. So those are my two other concerns for this policy.
Thank you, Board Member Levy. Any other discussion?
I do.
Here. Dr. Garrison?
Sure, thank you. So the closed session space, whether it's in person or virtual, as long, again, if it's secure, then the not allowing piece, again, if the goal is collaboration, I'm not sure why it would be not allowed. I mean, so that's a space that, I mean, in today's world that we live in, naturally, if let's just say we have another pandemic, right, which could possibly be, and we have to go remote. You know, we can come in, of course, suspend policy, right? But in those spaces, I believe we probably would have to be closed virtually. And so I just think that if it's a secure space, then that's a possibility. Now, as it pertains to the rest of the policy, I'm not sure if we're going to go into discussion around that or not, but I have some other thoughts about some of the other spaces outside of the green space that's highlighted.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison. Board Member Levy?
Thank you so much. And Dr. Garrison, thank you for those comments because it made me think of something else. Has legal looked at this? Because I'm not sure if we have the authority to exclude a board member from participating virtually, especially, and I get the goal is for us to be together. But if we allow virtual participation in open session, I don't know if we can exclude a board member from having that same ability to participate in closed. So I would just want to have that run by legal. And the reason I ask, I'll leave it at that. I don't know if we have the authority to exclude.
Thank you, Board Member. Board President Johnson?
Thank you. Dr. Garrison, how do we determine if a space is secure? And how do we know that that space is secured during the entirety of the meeting? And this, Board Member Levy, this is from WASB meeting on open meetings laws I attended on November 12th, where WASB took the stance where they strongly advised against remote participation in executive session.
Did they give a reason why they, and I get it's better, it's easier, it's the nuance, but did they give a legal rationale for why that wouldn't happen?
For the issue of confidentiality, integrity of the information being discussed in the meeting, if things haven't changed since November, there weren't any laws prohibiting board members from partaking virtually, but it was WSB's stance that it's a bad practice. quote, I mean, that's in my notes, it is a bad practice. And I think we've had some different hiccups with some of those issues, concerns with the integrity of our closed session meetings, and the one time when whatever electronic device was in there that was.
I'm interrupting because I don't want us to go into what happened in
Okay.
closed session and open session.
Okay, but just that there are many different things that can happen and concerns that this would help us avoid that.
Board Member Hankins, did you?
Yeah, just commenting, again, I agree with Board President Johnson, secured space. Who knows? You know, I'm not calling on anybody, but I do know when we go into closed session, the doors are shut, they're maintained shut. I've even seen Dr. Garrison go out to make sure the hallway is cleared. And then we go remote, and we don't know if there's anybody else in the room where a remote person is. I'm not calling on anything, but I'm just saying it's because that person chooses not to be here, they're given more latitude than a person who has showed up and is in that room and is in secure place. So I think this has a very credible policy change. We're in charge of policy change, and this is a policy. So I think it's very good that we're looking at it and talking about it.
Thank you, Board Member Hankins. As reference to the part about the with legal counsel. Well, first of all, legal counsel is attorney-client privilege. So, you know, if they're not following their law, you know, their own ethics, then we got a lot of problems, more than this. So, I think, again, I believe that we need to be here, and if that closed session needs to be done in person, because that's the only way that we can totally make sure that it's a secure situation. So, could we get a motion to move this policy forward to the full board for first reading with the first amended that Mrs. Levy. Michelle, did you get that, by the way? You've got that right. So could you read that again, please?
So the sentence would read, a member who is not present may not vote by proxy and may, in their absence, have their notes. Hang on, I rewrote it down at the bottom. And may, in their absence, have their notes shared by either the board president or committee chair during the meeting.
Okay, thank you. So could I get a motion?
Excuse me, I think we had the motion and then first, is that correct, Amy? No?
No, but you may want to say just as amended because we made other changes like the
Okay.
title and.
All right, thank you.
And
Well, yeah, that's correct. That includes the title change.
So moved.
It's on the policy. Okay. A motion to change the title of policy 183 to board member voting and participation in meetings, and the amended information that Mrs. Shope just read.
So moved.
Could I get a second? I'll second. Any more discussion? Board Member Levy.
thank you so much. I'm not able to vote in favor of this because I think it's appropriate for us to see if we have the authority. And I'm not saying I disagree with anything that was said about security of closed session and the importance of us being here, but I think it's appropriate for us to have this cleared by legal to see if we have the authority to exclude board members from closed sessions, because we may find that, yes, you can do it, although it is not preferred, but these are the guidelines you have to follow. You have to confirm you're in a secure location by doing X. So that's why I'm not able to support it.
Thank you, Board Member Levy. All those in favor say aye.
I have a question in the discussion part.
Dr. Garrison?
Thank you. The next sentence there says, members may vote on a topic if they have participated in the meeting and discussion for that topic. So,
Dr. Garrison, that's from the original policy.
so
That's not been changed.
correct. I understand. That may be true, but I just want to make sure I get my thoughts out here. If they have participated in the meeting and discussion for that topic, how do we determine if they have participated in the meeting? I know it's written back in 19, revised in 22, but.
Board Member Levy?
Thank you so much. So hopefully this will provide some clarity. Let's say that you all are on agenda item A1, and I come in right at the time of the vote. What this is saying is it's not appropriate for me to participate in the vote because I haven't consumed the discussion, I haven't heard all of the perspectives, so I am not as informed as the rest of my colleagues. Now, you can disagree with that, but that's what that language in the policy is stating, is that in order to vote on something, you need to be present for the discussion of that topic.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
So, but what if I came informed? What if I read the notes? What if I looked over the discussion and I thought about what was supposed to be discussed, like you prepared to come to a meeting, and that's a space too, Mrs. Levy, that I think I think all board members probably have the right to from that space. And so I just don't know. I just want to make sure I put that out there too.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison. Board President Johnson?
Thank you. Dr. Garrison, we're a board of 7 or committees of 3, and you can do all of your research. You might have a PhD in the item we're discussing, but the idea is to come here and hear our colleagues and then make that decision.
Thank you, Board President Johnson. Okay, moving on.
You going to take a vote on that?
Yes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Nay.
Motion is moved to the full board for the first reading and passed 2-1. Okay, next item is item D, 185.5, Human Resources Committee.
It's 185.
I'm sorry, 185. Yeah, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. So, as you can see, there's been some changes made because of we changed our cadence, our meetings, and all that sort of thing. So these are the changes that have been made to 185. So I will open that up for discussion. Hearing none, can I get a motion to move this forward to the full board for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carried, 3-0. So, next item is 185-1, 85-5, jeez. And we are basically, well, this is to cancel the policy because we no longer are meeting as a committee because we've absorbed it into the general agenda, and then if we have a closed session item, we go to. So is there, for discussion, and Board Member Levy, you're up first.
I just had one question on policy 185.5. The status is listed as proposed, which that's usually reserved for brand new policies. So I'm wondering why the status isn't to be retired, because it seems like, unless I'm missing something, that is what the administration is recommending, that we retire policy 185.5. So I just wanted to confirm that that's accurate.
Correct. We're going to retire it, right?
That's correct. It's being proposed to be retired. So
Got it.
that's why it says proposed, because if I actually said retired, it would go into the retired section. So I can't say that yet.
So just a quick thing. So like in 185, the status says up for revision. Do you have the option to put up for retirement?
I can look into that.
I mean, which
I
isn't a
might be
huge
able
deal,
to
but okay.
make that.
And I don't want to curtail discussion, but
Yeah.
unless there's something,
I'll look at it.
Thank you. I move that we retire policy 185.5, Human Resources Committee.
So moved. She moved. Second, sorry.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carried. This policy is retired. 3-0.
Well, it still needs to go onto the full board.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Right. Needs to go to the full board for first reading. Yeah, to be retired. Okay, next policy is 223-1, 2E, tuition continuing education reimbursement. This came to the policy committee to determine if we want to suspend or retire this policy due to the issues with, for the budget that we've already discussed earlier in the year. So I will open it for discussion, and then we'll go from there. Board Member Levy?
Thank you. So just a few questions. The first is, are teachers eligible for continuing education credit reimbursement, or is it just administrators? Just administrators. Okay, thank you for that clarification. So just the notes that I have on this is that I would actually recommend, one, that we keep it, and two, that we combine policy. And the reason behind, yes, I think we should keep it, is because I appreciate that, let me find the correct language, that every February we get a report on budget impact. Where are my notes? What is it called? The administrative forecast of continuing education credit reimbursement procedures. And for me, I think this is a benefit that benefits not just our administrators, but also our students. And since we are, in my opinion, being responsible with that forecast that comes in February, we have an idea of how it will impact the budget, and then we can decide if that's something, that amount that we can approve. And it's my understanding, someone jump in if I'm wrong, in order for an administrator to be able to use this benefit, they have to have gone through the administrative forecasting process. So that's why I'm in favor for it. And then just my notes is, I think it would be appropriate to combine policies 223.1 and 223.1 Rule 1, and adjust the title to read Administrator Continuing Education Credit Reimbursement, just because the information on 223.1 is just so minimal. And is it okay if I just continue with my short list? Go ahead. Okay, thank you. And then if we're looking at the content on the current 223.1, that last sentence that says, in accordance with provisions of current employee agreements, unless I'm missing something, if we could just keep our language consistent and say current administrator contracts, because I'm assuming that this benefit is listed in the contract. And then instead of "and establish procedures," just to keep our language consistent, I would propose "and administrative forecast of continuing education credit procedures." So it's very precise what needs to be followed in order to take advantage of this. And then I have a few questions, but it's on the current information that's in Rule 1. So I'll pause in case my other colleagues have questions on just the current policy.
May I?
Yes.
My thought was that this was being brought to the policy committee because as part of our budget reductions, we proposed that we were eliminating this moving forward. And so this is we couldn't take it out of our contracts because it's policy. So we're trying to bring it to policy to retire it because we shared with the community that this process was going to be eliminated as part of our budget cuts.
Let me add to that. From my understanding in this space, I don't disagree with you, Mrs. Almendarez, but I thought we were pausing it. We're pausing this benefit due to our budgetary constraints. So that's where I was landing in that space.
And Mr. Chady, I saw you move over, so.
Yeah, was it paused, eliminated? I don't recall. There's three key pieces to this issue. There's budget, there's board policy, and there's administrative contracts. Currently, there's a policy says that we do this thing. There's administrative contracts that the board just approved last month that provides this benefit. However, in the budget, we do not have an allocation in that line item. However, in absence of the budget, the district still has board policy that says if an administrator was to come forward and go through the process, that perhaps it would be reimbursed. So, again, just trying to get alignment of these three issues, budget, policy, and administrative contracts, so that there's more certainty to it all.
Okay, but did we not suspend tuition reimbursement?
We eliminated it in the budget process.
Yes.
But your policy still exists.
Well-
And you just approved administrative contracts that provides this benefit as well.
Okay. Board Member Levy?
Oh, thank you. So, Mr. Shady, don't go too far. I think I may have a solution, and I think the solution is found in policy 223.1, Rule 1, number 4. So that states, for those who don't have it in front of them, every February, a forecast of current administrators' intention to use continuing education credit reimbursement during the next budget year will be performed to anticipate budgetary impacts. So I totally get there's not a current line item in the budget, but it does still exist, the potentiality for this in policy and in their contracts. So, and this is for next year. So are we not on track to receive that report of who would like to use this for next year? Because I think what might be helpful is, even though it's not a line item in the budget, and I don't like to do this, but I'm willing to make an exception if we are able to cover it by shifting something else, and we know how much that amount will be, then I am fine with moving forward. And what might happen in that February report is we get all of the requests and we say we can honor this amount. So for example, if 3 people want to take 6 credits, the board may say each of you can take 1 class, and then we approve that, and then we find the money for that specific thing. So that still honors the contract, it honors the policy, but that number 4 gives us the flexibility to limit it if we need to, because we can't identify the money for next year. And I would love to hear feedback from my colleagues.
Board Member Hankins.
Thank you. Yes, until Dee Dee got up there, I was going to absolutely say that my recollection was this was to retire it because we couldn't afford it. And I didn't know why we were proceeding forward with it, so thank you. My second question goes into in the contracts. And let's just say it stayed the way it is. And is there anything in the contract, okay, so an administrator furthers their education, is there any handle we have on them? Can they get their education from us and we reimburse them and then they go somewhere else? Which I'm totally against, but.
There is stipulation about how long they have to work for us prior to being eligible and after.
And that's standard in every administrator's contract?
I don't want to speak off the top of my head. I think that that's more covered, and it doesn't go, if I recall correctly, it's not detailed in the contract itself. That provision is part of policies and procedures. Mm-hmm.
Oh, no problem. It's number 14 on the Rule 1 of this policy.
Okay, I'd like to go back to item 4. So the impact will be submitted to the board in February for approval. So that wasn't submitted last night. So is it? So
Right, so that therein is a challenge.
yeah.
A suggestion that I would have is that with regards to number 4, that first every February be changed to January. That way, the process of reaching out to the administrators occurs in January, thus providing us the ability to bring the information to the board in February, either at that first regular meeting or the second regular meeting. And does it come to the board or does it flow through the finance committee? It's entirely up to the board to decide on that, right?
Well, yes, that's true. But either way, it's going to go to the general board that same night.
Right.
If it goes to the finance committee, right?
But just keeping in mind that the finance committee occurs on the first Tuesday of the month. So, trying to bring you something for February, doing the survey in February
Yeah.
is just,
Too much. What you're saying?
well, it's no more than 7 days, right? So,
Yeah. Okay.
And one last thing, we do not have any to submit in February because administrators were communicated that this was not happening. So there is no list to present to you.
Okay. That's what I thought. Board President Johnson.
Thank you. Should this come to the board before the contracts are signed? And you'll have to forgive me, I'm a little bit confused because if this is already in their contracts, and I know I've signed several contracts, all of them, and I guess I'm wondering, what is our obligation if it's in their contracts And if it comes to us in February, but the signing of the contracts takes place in January, shouldn't it happen before the contract is signed?
I think board policy and the contract language provides the board great flexibility, to be honest with you. I mean, you can make a decision in between the contract language and/or the policy. You're not obligated to doing it. So I'm not sure that a timing thing really matters per se, but I would suggest that perhaps as we go forward into the future, when it comes to administrative contracts, 2 years from now, next year with new people, whatever, that perhaps we just need to look at that. A good point, in the current policy on number 8, it says administrators must complete 2 contract years of administrative service before the administrator will be allowed to participate. The contract itself says 1 year. Now, again, the board has the ability to, adjust, make changes. I'm not quite sure that it's worth the paper that it's written on, but, so.
I just have to ask a question. So the administration brought this to the policy committee for recommending suspension and retirement. So that's why it's here. And you've so eloquently pointed out that there are no requests because we've already told the administrators that we weren't going to do it. So I guess, and before I hear from Board Member Levy and Dr. Garrison, I just want to say, where I sit, I'm leading toward we need to suspend it, and things change after the referendum, and then going forward, then we can pull it back out of suspension and go. Michelle, is that the way it works? Okay, thank you. Okay, that's my 2 cents. Board Member Levy.
Thank you. So I have a couple concerns. One, I don't think it's ethical to tell someone that they can't use a benefit that is in their signed contract. And I think that leaves us legally vulnerable. So that is a concern. The next thing is number 4 says every February a forecast of current administrators' attentions comes to the board. That does not mean that information is compiled in February. That can be compiled in September or any time before, but the report comes to the board in February. I am in favor of keeping this benefit because it is in the signed contract that our administrators have. I'm a little concerned that the contract language says they need to be with us for 1 year. If you continue reading number 8 that you mentioned, the last clause says, unless otherwise provided for the individual's contract. So my additional question is, and you don't have to give me exact numbers, but do we have many contracts that differ from the standard contracts where people have negotiated specific benefits?
They don't have one. That was changed at some point in stage 1. But the board may want to change it back to 2 at some point and be consistent with that. But it has been 1 year of service since I've been here.
Okay, so here's my recommendation. I think, 1, we need to let administrators know this benefit is in your contract, and if you want to potentially take advantage of it, let us know immediately. And then I think that forecast needs to come to the board, even if it's not in February. If you can't compile it that quickly, then maybe we do it in March. And then the board will be looking at a number, not a guess, a number, and then we can decide if we are willing to commit to that. So that's how I think we should move forward, but again, this is a committee decision.
Dr. Garrison?
Yes, I've always thought that we put a pause on this based off our financial constraints, and so I remain in that space because that's what we discussed. We needed to pause it because of our financials, And right now, to be honest with you, with the deficit and the impact of just having a deficit, we probably wouldn't be bringing more money to spend with not knowing where we will be in April, unfortunately. So I just want to make sure I shared that. I also agree with Mrs. Levy because this is one of those benefits that I think is beneficial to not just the staff, but it's also something that's been written. And so pausing it, I hate to say suspending it, whatever terminology we want to use, still allows us to, figure out how we can move this forward later or not, and it's not like it's taken away from our administrative team or their contracts.
Board President Johnson.
Well, I'm so old. And that's where you guys go, how old are you? I remember when the district used to provide compensation reimbursement for teachers as well to take classes. So I am disappointed that this is limited to just administrators, because I think continuing education as an educator is imperative beyond just professional development. I tend to side with Board Member Levy in leaving this, knowing that there is nobody this year applying for it. I'm comfortable with us leaving it as is and perhaps having the policy committee revisit it after we know the results of the referendum.
Board Member Hankins, do you?
Yes, I'm in agreement with Board President Johnson, but I would like not to leave it, to suspend it, with the caveat that it comes back to the policy for revision or look at again in the fall or whatever you want to do in the future. And I would like to address what Board President Johnson said and revisit the teacher language also for continuing education. I think it would be if we do get healthy, it's a hiring tool to say we do offer this. So I'm all for suspending, but definitely revisiting.
Thank you, Board Member Hankins. Board Member Levy?
Thank you. I'm just, and it's possible that I missed this, so if I did, forgive me. Why did this remain in the contract if it was simultaneously, I'm assuming it was simultaneously, being taken out as like a deficit measure? Then why would we keep it in the contract? And I just want to reiterate, one, I'm concerned that we have communicated to employees that you are not allowed to use a benefit that is in, or we are not going to honor a benefit that is in your contract without it going through the forecasting process and then the board saying, no, we can't afford it, because I think that leaves us legally liable. And two, since the policy is still active, I think I am in favor of telling people, if you want to utilize this benefit in your contract, then this is the window to make that request. I just don't think it's fair to have it both ways.
So I'll try to address a portion of your question or your statement there. The initial part about why it's still in, I can't speak to that. That's outside of my scope and responsibilities. I do happen to have my administrator contract here before me, and I'll just read to you the education expense section. After 1 year of employment, the board agrees to reimburse the administrator for tuition expenses associated with college or university coursework that has been pre-approved by the board in accordance with board policy. No issue up to that point, really, other than, in the budget, or I'm sorry, out of the budget, currently board policy still exists. The next sentence is key, though. However, the administrator agrees that the board retains the discretion to modify or cancel this reimbursement program during the term of the contract. So again, the board has provided much latitude there to make changes, to say, hey, we can't fully fund at the amount that we had intended, but we can cover 10 cents on your dollar or none. So You know, much like the policy speaks to if we can, we can, the contract also speaks to if we can, we can. You know, why the policy says 2 years, the contract says 1 year, the policy does have that unless otherwise specified in the contract. But if all the contracts specify 1 year, why not just have the 1 year in the policy?
Ms. Levy, does that answer your question? I knew that that was a part of the contract language, that there's an out. Unfortunately, I hate to say it like that, but there's a clause that prevents, you know, the board from having to commit to something that, unfortunately, when these types of things happen, we can't afford.
Thank you for following up. It does. However, briefly, I think it's one thing for us to suspend it or to say, no, we can't do it for this reason, but I'm not comfortable, if this is what happened, with employees being told they can't use a benefit that's in their contract without following the process that's laid out in the contract and in policy. That makes me uncomfortable.
The contract gives us that levity, though, of, like Mr. Chady just read, that clause there. So regardless of, for me, I'm just going to speak for me in this space as a district administrator, I believe, again, the contract allows us that levity to protect the board from obligations that, due to financial constraints, we couldn't commit to. The policy, though, I mean, I hear what people are saying about the 1 year versus 2 year. It's been the same way since I've been here. So, but the policy gives us that space as well. A lot of times you'll see policy does protect the district, you know, and so I believe that's how this was probably written, for the protection from the school district's perspective. So, you know, I just want to make sure that, again, that language in the contract does protects the board and the district from overcommitting to something that we can't financially approve.
Board Member Hankins?
Yeah, I think to Mrs. Levy's point, I think, and I know where she's coming from. I think it would, and we don't know what the language was to the administrators on to saying they couldn't use this. You know, if it was prefaced by saying, as in your contract language, we, you know, are not just saying, you cannot do this. I think that would help us, and I agree with you, Mrs. Levy, that how it was communicated, not just yanking their chain and saying, nope, you can't do it. And that's an administration thing, how that was communicated back to administrators.
So, Dr. Garrison, can we get a clarification? Was it communicated to the administrators, and how was it communicated, and when was it communicated? Because I think it really has a bearing on this, what we're going to do with this.
So it was communicated that we were, you know, of course, this was something that was going to pause in during the reductions conversation. The second part of the conversation, Mrs. Almendarez mentioned how that was communicated. I'm not 100% sure of, but I know what we had always been talking about was that this was something that we couldn't commit to. However, in the contracts, again, it still gives us that space, and the policy hadn't been changed yet. So we were trying to follow both where we're stuck in financially, what the policy states, and then we still have protections across the board. So if the board would be amenable to, of course, you know, keeping things the way they are, I would be fine with the understanding, again, if something was to come to us, we probably wouldn't be able to commit to it just based off of our financials currently, and we will be okay as things stand. Now, the board could also decide to suspend it, which is a space as well, until you know further notice.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison.
No problem.
I believe that what my suggestion is that we suspend it, temporarily suspend it, until further notice, that, you know, after further analysis, financial analysis, et cetera, then we can bring it back to the board and unsuspend it and make any adjustments that we need to then. Board Member Levy.
Thank you. I just have one remaining question. Since these forecasts are supposed to come every February for the following budget year, do we have any requests from last year that we approved and we are currently honoring? Or were those, hopefully the answer is no, approved last year and then we said, no, we're not doing this year?
So yes, I happen to have the forecast that was undertaken in January, reported to the board in February of 2024. There were two administrators that responded at that time, both requesting support of their educational advancement opportunities to the tune of 6 credits. One of the challenges with regards to the time frame is our reimbursement ties to the tuition rate for the University of Wisconsin system, but you don't know what that is in February for the fall, the upcoming semesters. I mean, we can approximate it, but of the two individuals and their total requested 12 credits, 6 credits each, we estimated the potential expenses in the 24-25 school year at $9,620. Neither of those two individuals have received any reimbursement after the board acted to remove it from the budget. So one of them received reimbursement in February of 2024 for work that they had done prior to that, and one received reimbursement, I think it was June or July of 2024, prior to the board eliminating that line item in the budget.
So just for clarification, we approved those 12 credits a year ago, and we have not honored that approval because of timing and when this benefit has been pulled. Is that accurate?
The line item in the budget has been eliminated, but your policy still exists, so it's just that mixed messaging, yeah.
No. So my question is, last year when we approved these 12 credits, it sounds like we have not honored the full 12 credits. And so I'm just wondering, before we honored our obligation, did the pulling of this benefit happen? And if yes, I'm assuming those employees were communicated to and said, because people plan their budgets around things that have been approved. So I'm just wondering how we tied up our approvals from last year.
Well, I don't think that the board necessarily approved the 12 credits. It's about making the board aware. We'd have to go back and read the policy and what the policy says, right? But it's more about, I think, how much to budget for it. And then the board subsequently lined out that budget item. So I think both of these individuals, if you are making an effort to seek the educational attainment that an individual is, you're undertaking that effort no matter if the district's going to pay for it or not, right? I mean, I want to get my doctorate degree so I can be a superintendent. I mean, it's great if my current employer helps reimburse me for that, and most do. But there's also that repayment schedule if when you leave. But even if the district doesn't, I still want to get my doctorate so I can be a superintendent, so I'll cover that expense.
Well, I think that's an assumption that I don't see the benefit in us making that assumption. And it does say in the policy following board approval. So if I'm understanding correctly, the board committed to employees last February and said we would cover your 12 credits. Because I'm assuming we followed policy because we're all on board with that. So the board approved it. And now I'm just wondering, did we honor that approval before we pulled the benefit. And then I'll stop, because that I want to know that, because I hope that we did, but it doesn't change my support for this, so I won't belabor the point.
Not reflected on here, and maybe a change going forward would be that we ought to include the semester, fall, spring. I believe that these courses were reflective of the fall of '24 and spring of '25. So thinking back in that time frame, the student is enrolling in class, and right about that same time frame, I think we were making the determination as to, can we afford this, or is that something that should go as part of the budgetary reductions? Neither of the individuals have sought, to my knowledge, reimbursement for any of those credits. And honestly, Dr. Garrison may know, I don't know if either of those individuals have attained their degree, if they're still, they're both, I think, relatively close to graduation.
That's correct. So I don't know if it's legal for to name names. Shouldn't be. No, shouldn't be. Yeah, so we don't have to. Yeah. No. So the individuals that I'm aware of, both are still in school processing their degrees, and then the one other person has received a license. And so at the time of this request, there were funds to help in that space. And so I think, Mr. Chait, I want to go back and I can just ask the people, did they submit anything, and we can kind of go from there. But I believe some reimbursement was given to an individual, an individual. Yeah, you're right. So there would, summer 24 was my last recollection. I don't know about the fall of 24. Yeah.
Board President Johnson.
Thank you, Vice President Nichols. I am really caught off guard here, and really disappointed if this body approved something last January, and then we said, no, we're not going to follow through with that. I'm disappointed in us. And my personal opinion is we should try to do everything we can to make this right, because we have a reputation with our community that we are trying to rebuild, and that includes trust. And if we tell somebody we're going to do something and then don't, that's not very trustworthy and trust building. This feels like we're going the opposite direction. And, I understand administrators, make decent money. I don't know which administrators these are. I don't know if they're at the top level or the bottom level. It doesn't matter. We said we were going to do something. Let's follow through with it. Dr. Garrison, let's perhaps have a conversation and see if we can get some resolution to this. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Board Member Hankins.
Yeah, well, and I totally agree with Tia on that point. But I think we have two things here. We have suspending of this, but also the other side of that coin is dealing with the two that have done and are in the process of taking those credits. And, but I think that's a side issue. I think we suspend this thing so we don't find ourselves in this position again. But I think Dr. Garrison and our board president, we can figure out a way to reimburse these people once they have attained what they're going to do and honor their contract, what we said we would do. But I do think it's two separate things and two separate issues.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, I need a motion. Either way.
I move that we suspend this policy until further notice, and if we want, I would love to put a date in there to revisit, whether it be July, August, September, whatever. But also in that caveat, we looked at the teacher compensation also. That's my motion.
Is there a second?
I'm not providing a second because I don't support it, but you may want to include the policy and the rule.
Yes. Board Member Hankins, can you Board President Johnson?
Before he does, can I suggest that you put a hard date or month in there?
The hard date would be then a policy first meeting in August for a revisit. And I'm not sure if I could have Michelle reread it.
What you may want to say is that
Yes.
you
Yes.
move to suspend policy 223.1 and rule 1 of that policy
Yes.
until the first policy meeting in August.
Thank you. Whatever she just said, I agree with.
Okay. Is there a second? I'll second. Any more discussion? Sure, Dr.
Typically,
Garrison.
and I know August was mentioned. Of course, I have to wait for discussion naturally. Would there be any thought to this being July? Because typically teachers administrators definitely have to enroll in school. Sessions start in fall. Knowing if that's going to happen would be a better beneficial space. So just, would prefer it to be revisited technically in June because you register for school in July and go back to school in August kind of thing. So I would prefer June to be a space. And if it's there, great. If it's not, then we can always keep, possibly extending that.
June or July?
I prefer June, but, the new year starts July for board purposes type of thing. But June for this space makes more sense because you're ending school technically in May to start possibly even a summer session in June. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. So in colleges, they end in May. Not like we do. So, college, yeah. So that's just a little different time.
And also with that, we'll be looking for teachers. So it'd be a good bonus if we could add that into it. So yes, I'd like to amend the motion. I don't know the proper procedure on that and include that, Mrs. Shope. Also to change it to June, first our meeting in June, policy meeting in June.
Hang on. I'm going to look up the date. That would be June 4th, 2025. Okay, I'm going to amend the motion to revisit the suspension on June 4th, 2025 at the June Policy Committee meeting. Could I get a second?
A second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Nay.
Okay. Yep. So so that passed 2-1. So now we need to go back to the original motion, which Board Member Hankins, you used August, and I seconded. So,
I'm so sorry to interrupt. That's already been remedied because the amendment passed.
Okay.
So when you go back to the main motion, it's the amended main motion now.
oh, okay. So, we're voting on the the amended main motion. Voting, because we've already, yes.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Nay.
Okay, both passed 2-1. The next meeting date is Wednesday, March 5th at 5:30 PM. Could I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Meeting adjourned at 7:10. Thank you, everybody.